I've been searching for the perfect, slightly muted neutral pink blush because most pink blush shades either turn too orange or too red on my face. So today I'll be reviewing 25 blushes today to find the perfect neutral pink blush. This video is mostly focused on shade and color, so basically color focus guide to find the perfect pink blush for your skin. Before getting to the products, let's clarify what neutral pink actually means in this video. First, what's neutral in color? When I say a color is neutral, I mean it doesn't lean cool or warm. It just sits right in the middle and it works on all skin undertone. Then what's the neutral pink color? So technically neutral pink can actually mean a lot of different things, which is why I was so confused because when I tried a bunch of neutral pink blush shade in the market, I found that all the shades look different on my skin, even though the brand labeled the shade is something neutral pink color. So that's why I was so confused about the definition of neutral pink. I asked you guys on my Instagram and YouTube community, and this is what you guys think neutral pink is. First, it has to be balanced color, not too warm, not too cool. Second, the shade shouldn't turn too orange or too red on our skin. So based on that, we are going to find the perfect neutral pink blush that tick all these boxes. We have a lot of products to talk about, so let's get started. So the first blush to review is this Rhode Pocket Blush. I have all shades of this blush and I chose the shade Tint line, and the brand described this as a pinky tan color. This is a muted mid-tone pink color with a hint of warm. I would say it looks still pretty neutral but more on the warm side. If I compare to this tan line shade with other Rhode blush shades, first the Sleepy Girl looks more like cool mauve color, whereas this tan line looks definitely warm. And when I compare it to the shade Freckle, the freckle shade looks warmer and the tan line looks more neutral. Once I applied to my cheeks, I could see a mid-tone pink with a hint of red, like a strawberry blush. After one layer, the pigment is very sheer, giving like a subtle flush. Even after two layers, it remains sheer, but you can still notice a soft pink with a touch of red. Overall, I found this shade is more suitable for people with warm, neutral undertones. If you have olive tone skin like me, the color might appear a little bit warm or slightly orangish on your skin. Since it is mid-tone color, I found that it looked good for light medium skin tone. Next, the Rare Beauty Soft Pinch Liquid Blush, and I have all shades and I chose the shade Hope, which is described as a nude mauve, and I found this shade Hope is the most neutral color among all the blush shade options from this liquid blush. And once I swatch this color, it looks like a soft muted pink blush color, and once it's blended, it softens into a more like delicate soft pink color, which is like a perfect neutral pink blush shade. And if I compare this to the other Rare Beauty blush shades, this shade Encourage is described as soft neutral pink, but it actually reads more like a dusty mauve shade. Hope, on the other hand, is closer to a true soft neutral pink on me. Meanwhile, this Adore color looks cooler. They all different, and the Hope looks much warmer than these two shades. With just one swipe, the color looks like a neutral pink. Once blended, it appears slightly warmer than the original shade. When I add another layer, it develops into a red flush with a touch of warm. But it's not that too warm color, so I found that it is still ideal for people with neutral and olive skin like me. As I said earlier, I have all the blush shades from this Rare Beauty, and I found that this Hope shade looks the best on me. So overall, this shade looks good for people with olive and neutral skin. If you have a bit of warmth in your skin, this will look great on your skin as well. Since it has a pretty strong coverage, I found that if you have light skin, you might have to put a really tiny bit of amount to get a natural look. So I think this shade will look great for people with light medium and medium skin. Next up, we have another cream blush. This is Summer Friday's Blush Butter Balm in the shade Soft Strawberry. This is pretty recent launch, so I was so excited to try, and it looks so beautiful. There are 6 shades available, and I chose this shade Soft Strawberry since it's described as neutral pink. And in the packaging, it looks pretty muted, but when I swatch the color on the back of my hands, it instantly looks brighter and more vibrant. and it definitely reads warm. So I'm pretty sure this one has more like warm tone. And I found that this Summer Bright Day one has pretty identical texture or the color payoff with this Chanel Balm, which I'm going to talk about it later. I think Chanel shade is more muted and slightly warmer. And also I found this is very identical with this REFY cream blush. The REFY one is a touch more muted, but overall the colors are pretty similar. And when I apply to my skin, after one layer, a light vibrant warm pink appears on my skin. Once blended, it becomes very sheer, true to the shade. And after another layer, the red flush comes through a bit more strongly. Overall, I found this shade will be suitable for people with warm neutral undertones, but it's still not that strongly warm, so it's in between when warm and neutral, but slightly more on the warm side. Since it has really light vibrant color, I found that it will look good for light and light medium skin. Next we have this Westman Atelier Lip and Cheek Blush in the shade Petal. This is one of the blushes that I wore the most last year, and the brand described this Petal shade as Dusty Nude Rose shade, which I think this is a perfect description of neutral pink blush color. When I saw the color in the packaging, I found that it looks slightly more like a mauve shade, more like a cool tone pink color. And when I swatch it on the back of my hands, it looks exactly like mauve pink shade. After blending, the more of a pink hue comes through rather than warm tones. And if I compare this shade with this Rhode Pocket Blush in Tan Line, you can definitely see the Westman Atelier one looks much cooler and the Rhode one is more like warm, toasty shade. And if I compare this with more like a cooler shade, which I'm going to talk about later, this is Giorgio Armani Luminous Silk Cheek Tint in the shade 62. And you can see this Giorgio Armani one looks cooler, more like a mauve shade, whereas this Westman Atelier one looks more neutral. So I would say this Westman Atelier color looks perfectly neutral with a slightly, very tiny hint of cool color. And on my cheeks, one swipe shows a more muted pink blush at first. After blending, it appears as a soft pink with just a hint of red, leaning more towards pink. Overall, this shade works perfectly for people with neutral olive and cool undertones, and it will work well if you have light to medium skin, medium and tan skin. Next up is this HAUS Glassy Blush Balm in the shades Glassy Ginger. This is one of the blushes I reach out the most if I want to create the neutral blush look, and this is a shade that I'm wearing right now. It looks very natural pink color on my skin. The brand describes this shade as a like deep mauve shade, but I found that this shade comes out more natural once it's applied to the skin rather than being too purple or too mauve shade. To me, it sits somewhere between mauve and pink. Looking at the shade itself, you can definitely tell it's muted, not overly saturated or red. On my skin, it reads more pink and doesn't pull orange or warm. Compared to this Rhode Pocket Blush in Tan Line, I found that this HAUS one looks much more muted and cooler. Once applied, you can clearly see the muted pink mauve shade on my skin. When blended, it turns into soft, neutral pink on the skin. Even after second layer, the color stays consistent. It doesn't turn too red or orange. I think this is just a perfect definition of mauve pink blush that works perfectly for people with neutral and olive skin tone. But if you have a strong warm undertones in your skin, I found that this shade will look too cool or too washed out. Since it has a pretty light coverage, it will work well if you have medium skin as well. So this shade will look great for people with light to medium skin. Moving on to one of my favorite blush in 2025, it is this Saie Dew Blush. I have all shades of this, okay, and I chose this shade Lady, which I found this could be the perfect muted neutral pink blush color. When I swatch it on the back of my hands, I found that this shade is just perfect definition of neutral pink, a little bit of mauve shade. If I compare this shade Lady to other Saie Dew blush shades, the shade Rosy looks definitely warmer and much more like lighter. And if I compare this shade with Sweetie, which is described as a neutral pink, I think it's actually more vibrant, warm pink color. That's what I can say why we are so confused about blush shades, because how brand describe the shade is very confusing, and sometimes the colors on the website looks very different with the shade in real life. So that's why it's really best to test the shade if you can at the store before you actually buy the product. And when I compare this shade to the other brand's mauve/pink blush color, which is this HAUS Blush Balm, it looks very similar, but HAUS one runs a bit cooler, and the Westman Atelier Saie shade is more saturated, and Saie sits right in between the two. Once applied to my cheek, it shows a muted saucy pink color. After blending, it turns into a soft pink, a slightly red flush. After 2 layers, the red flush becomes more noticeable, but still isn't too red. Overall, I found that this is just a perfect muted neutral pink blush color with a hint of mauve shade. So this will work great if you have neutral, olive, and cool undertones. And this shade is perfect color for people with light to medium skin like me as well. Next up, another cream blush. This is Merit Flush Balm. There's actually no shade option, something more like muted or neutral pink. So I just chose this shade Cheeky, as it's described as cool pink. And when I see the picture, it looks like a beautiful muted soft pink color. Looking at the color itself, it looks like just cool pink color, like a slightly very feel. So it definitely gives off more cool tone vibes. And once it's blended onto the back of my hands, it turns into more like a purple cool pink color. So it's definitely not a muted shade that I expected. And obviously on my cheek, the berry shade shows up right away. Blend it out, it turns into a cool pink color. After 2 layers, the pink really stands out. Overall, I found this shade will work well for people with cool undertones, not the neutral and not even olive. Next up, this was one of the most viral blushes last year, and this is Blurry Pudding Pot. It's a lip and cheek product that has a really fluffy pudding-like texture, and the fwee is a Korean brand, and there are like 35 different shades available, which is crazy. But because of the huge number of the color options, I found it can be very tricky to find the perfect shade for our skin tone, but thankfully the brand created this color chart that shows which shades are warm, cool, or seasonal. This shade without sits in the middle, which means it works for every season and neutral undertones. Compared to other shades I tried, this shade is light color, it's neutral, and once it's blended, it softens to more like beautiful baby pink color. And if I compare this shade with other fwee colors in the same line, they're definitely cooler, whereas this one is more neutral and muted. And if I compare this shade with the HAUS blush stick, the fwee one definitely looks vibrant and more like a pink tone color, whereas this HAUS is more muted mauve shade. With just one swipe, the color looks like a perfect neutral pink shade. After blending, it's very sheer. It still gives a soft pink blush. With another layer, it stays pink without pulling too warm or too red. Overall, I found this shade could be the perfect definition of light neutral pink color that works perfectly for people with neutral and olive skin. Since this is a pretty light color, I found that this will work well for people with mostly light skin tones. Next, another pudding pot like blushes. I found it Bobbi Brown also have this fluffy texture cream blush. Unfortunately, their original lip and cheek balm doesn't have like neutral pink or anything neutral options, so I had to pick this Pot Rouge Velvet Cream Blush, which you can use for lip and cheeks. And I chose this shade Tea Rose, and it is described as muted dusty rose shade. And the color itself matches the description of the muted rosy shade. It's just like perfect description, but it leans slightly warmer and has a more of a nude tone in it. And if I compare this shade with this fwee pudding pot in without, the fwee shade looks more vibrant and cooler, while the Bobbi Brown one leans warmer and more nude. And on my skin, with one swipe, it reads as a dusty rose shade. After blending, it pulls slightly redder than the color in the packaging, but still gives more a pink blush rather than a true red color. And with one more layer, the colors start to getting more red. So if you want to keep this dusty rose color, you might just put a really light layer of this instead of like going too red with a lot of layer. So overall, I found that this has a really tiny bit of warmth in this color, but still works well for neutral and olive skin. I found this could be somewhere in between warm and neutral, not that perfectly neutral color. So if you have warm/neutral undertones, this shade will work really well. Next, we have liquid blush. This is Armani Beauty Luminous Silk Cheek Tint, and I chose the shade 62 Delicate Mauve, and it's described as the zero shade. In the packaging, you can see a bit mauvey pink color, and after blending, it reads more like a cool pink. So it could be a great option for cool undertone as well. If I compare it to the Westman Atelier blush shade Petal, the Armani Beauty one looks more purple and cooler, whereas Westman Atelier appears more muted and neutral. After one swipe, you can see some mauve and purple tones, which appears more like a pink on my skin. Once blended, it looks even more pink, and after another layer, it becomes soft pink without any red, orange, or warm undertones. Overall, if you have cool, neutral undertones and even olive, you find that this shade will work really well. But this has a bit more like a cool tone in it, so you might find it too like cool or too blue on your skin if you have olive undertones. But still, this is a beautiful shade that doesn't turn orange or too red on my skin. Next up is this DIOR Backstage Rosy Glow Stick, and I chose the shade Rosewood, and I've been obsessed with this shade lately because it's just a perfect neutral pink blush that never turns orange on my skin. So I even created a no makeup look on my Instagram, and I film it under natural light so you can clearly see how the color looks on my skin, and it's just perfect neutral pink color. And the brand described this shade as just Rosewood, and I searched what the Rosewood shade is, and apparently it is more like a rosy brown shade. And when I swatch it on the back of my hand, you can see it's vibrant neutral pink color that works perfectly with my neutral olive skin, and when I blend it, it still keeps that pink color. And I think these three shades are pretty similar, and all my perfect neutral blush shades. The Rare Beauty one is more muted, while the fwee shade is more neutral compared to the DIOR one. But they're still very beautiful, perfect neutral pink blush color for my skin. Once blended into my skin, it looks like a vibrant strawberry pink color. It melts in beautifully, naturally, and it leaves a soft reddish pink hue. And after another layer, it transforms into a beautiful pink blush. Overall, I found this to be a perfect neutral pink blush that works really well for my skin, neutral olive. So I highly recommend this one, and I love the finish. It gives that glassy blush cheek look. So I really love this one. Next, we have very bougie one. This is Chanel Lip and Cheek Balm, and I have all the shades from this blush, and I found that all the shades are very vibrant, like red base color, and this is the only muted shade I could find. And I chose the shade Too Healthy Pink, and the brand described as a light nude pink color. When I swatch it on the back of my hand, the shade is very vibrant, warm pink instead of light nude pink color, and once blended, the pink really stands out. I wanted to compare this Chanel Balm with this Lawless cream blush because these two seems very identical, and I found that this Chanel shade looks more vibrant with stronger red tones, while the Lawless blush is more muted and more towards pink. So I think this Lawless one could be more like a perfect neutral color than this Chanel one, but I will talk about this later. With just one swipe, it shows a slightly reddish pink blush with a hint of warm, so it doesn't read as nude pink at all. After blending, the red and subtle oranges tones remain noticeable as it leans towards warm. So overall, I found this is more suitable for people with warmer tone rather than neutral and olive, since it has pretty a lot of warm in this color. Up next is this REFY cream blush, and I chose the shade Malaya, and the brand described this shade as dusty pink with neutral undertones. As soon as I see the neutral pink in the description, I was so excited to try this shade, and if I see the color in the packaging, I could instantly see that a slightly a bit warm color, and when I swatch it on the back of my hands, it has a really subtle warm tone in it, but still pretty neutral color, and its color is slightly vibrant than muted. And I found that this shade is pretty similar to the Blurry Pudding Pot in the shade Without, but the REFY blush is slightly warmer and a bit more vibrant. With just one swipe, the color appears slightly warm on my skin. It's giving like a vibrant strawberry shade. After blending, it softens into a neutral pink. With another layer, I found that it adds more like warmth into my skin, but not too much. Overall, even though it has a slightly warm tone in the color, I found that this still could be the perfect neutral pink blush, so something in between neutral and warm color. And I finally got to introduce this product on my channel. This is actually the Korean brand, and I got this product when I traveled to Korea last November. And this is fwee by Vanilla Romantic Blush Lip and Cheek in the shade 26. Toasted. It is one of the most natural looking nude beige blush shades I ever tried. It doesn't look too pinkish or too mauvey color, but still it gives that very dusty, nudish pink color that just works perfectly on my skin. So I wear this a lot when I want to create more like a nudish beige color makeup look instead of too pinkish or too vibrant color. And it doesn't fall into that neutral pink color though. I still love this product and wanted to introduce this product on my channel. And it's really hard to find this type of shade in the Western market nowadays because most shades has a lot of warm or either too red. This doesn't have any like red or warm tint in it, and I found that it just appears exactly like this once it's blended into my cheek. Compared to the similar shades, this fwee by Vanilla blush is warmer than the Ciele blush and HAUS Lab ones, and it leans more towards a nude beige color. The color itself is true to its name. This shade is toasted nude. It looks muted, has sheer coverage, and isn't very saturated. Since the blush is very sheer color payoff, it appears as a muted beige on my cheeks. After blending, it almost disappears. And after multiple layers, it finally develops into a very subtle nude pink hue. And although this has pretty like warm nude beige color, I still find it works really beautifully on my neutral olive skin. So if you have warm, neutral, or even olive skin, this shade will look very beautiful and match really well with that type of nudish pink lip look. Next we have this liquid blush. This is Ciele Blush and Protect SPF 50 in the shade Bihati. The thing about this product is that it has SPF, so you can actually protect your skin while still giving color on your cheek, which is very cool. This blush shade Bihati is described as Dusty Rose shade. When I see the packaging itself, it looks definitely very muted, and once I swatch it on the back of my hand, the shade itself is muted, a slightly warm, like a nude beige color that definitely towards the warmer side. When blended with fingers, it softens to a gentle or like soft pink color. Compared to the other shade, it's pretty similar to this HAUS Lab blush, but the Ciele blush definitely leans warmer and lighter. And if I compare this with the Blurry Pudding Pot, which is very vibrant and light color, and the Ciele blush definitely warmer and more muted. And once I applied it to my cheek, it looks muted with a slightly nude beige tone. After blending, you can notice a bit more warm with a subtle orangish hint. So overall, I found this shade turns more orange tone than the pinkish tone, unfortunately, but still I used to use this a lot because of that beautiful muted color appears onto my cheeks. If you have warm neutral undertone, this shade will beautifully work well for your skin. Next up is a brand that I'm trying for the first time. It is LAWLESS Pinch My Cheek Soft Blur Cream Blush in the shade Angel. There are 8 shades available, and I chose the shade Angel, and the brand described as nude rose shade. When I see the packaging, the color itself looks like a very soft nude pink color. It looks like a perfect for like light skin with a bit of hint undertones, but it's not overly warm. I found that it looks very similar to the Milk makeup blush, like the OG cream blush. And if you've been following my channel, I use this a lot back in like 2020 or 2021. And the Milk makeup, I chose the shade Work, and I found that this Milk makeup one is slightly more saturated. And if I compare this shade with the Fwee Pudding Pot, the Fwee Pudding Pot looks cooler. On my skin, after one layer, it shows up as a warm pink blush. Once blended, it shifts towards a warm red blush. Even the color payoff is subtle. After 2 layers, the red blush becomes more noticeable. Although the color on the packaging looks very beautiful, like a perfect neutral pink blush, unfortunately this turns a little bit red or warms on my skin, so I found this can be the perfect color for warm neutral undertones. Keeping up with the cream blush category, this is Danessa Myricks Beauty's Yummy Skin Blurring Balm Powder in Rosy and Brunch. It has a cream to velvet finish, so blend it with your fingers. It melts very beautifully, but once you swatch it on the back of your hands or your skin, skin, it turns into more like a velvet satin finish. I chose this shade Rose and Brunch because it's described as neutral rosy pink shade. Compared to a pretty similar texture type of blush, which is Bobbi Brown and Blurry Pudding Pot, the Danessa one looks more saturated, redder and warmer with a more vibrant finish. So I would describe this shade Rose and Brunch as pinkish red with a touch of warmth, and once blended it reads more like a true red color. With one swipe you can see a vibrant strawberry rose pink on my skin, and when blended it leans more towards a red flush than straight pink. But it doesn't pull orange because of that neutral base, but it definitely giving that strawberry red flush vibe. So overall I found this shade is more suitable for people with neutral and warm undertones, and it has a very strong coverage and turns into like this red flush. Because of the high coverage and that red flush color, I found this shade could work well for more like a tan skin tone. Next up is actually a multi-palette, not a single shade, that includes 3 different shades and different texture, like a cream blush, highlighting balm, and a powder. And this is Morphe's multi-finish face trio in the shade After Party, and the brand described as a nude rose shade. And I'm gonna only review this cream part because I found this can be the perfect neutral pink blush color. The shade is more like a nudish rosy color and is true to its name, nude rose. Once blended, it shears out into a soft nude flush with a slight reddish tone. I found that this could be very similar to this Rhode Pocket Blush in Tan Line. The undertone is almost identical, but the Rhode one is more saturated and pulls redder. And if I compare this with the Blurry Pudding Pot, the Morphe one looks definitely warmer and more muted. And with just one swipe, it looks like a nude rose shade at first, but it leans more bronzy, and once it's blended, it definitely pulls more like a bronzy, summery look. And after another layer, it gives more like bronzy, red flush look. Overall, I found this shade is more like warm tones, bronzy nude color that's gonna work well for more like a medium tan skin. And I think this shade will something I will reach out for like summer, more like a hot season. Next up is a very nostalgic cream blush. This is Milk Makeup Lip and Cheek, and I chose the shade Work. I used to love this cream blush because of the sheer coverage, and it doesn't have that strong color payoff, so it really works well for like everyday natural makeup look. The shade Work is also a very beautiful shade, and the brand described as a dusty rose shade. And the color is clearly warm rosy tones, and it's definitely on the warm side compared to other warm neutral blushes, which is the Ciele Blush and Protect and this Bobbi Brown Velvet Cream Blush. Bobbi Brown leans warmer and more muted. The Ciele blush is also more muted but slightly darker than the Milk Makeup. On the first swipe of this Milk Makeup blush, it looks vibrant pink, but after blending, the sheer color payoff softens into a more pink blush, and after multiple layers, it leans more like a pink blush, but mostly because of the sheer coverage. So I found that it still leans like a warm color rather than neutral pink color. So I found that this can be perfect for neutral olive skin. Next we have this Makeup by Mario Soft Pop Blush Stick, and I chose this shade Sweet Pink. And the reason why I chose this shade is because it's described as neutral soft pink color, so I was very excited to try. I've noticed that like the patterns I see from reviewing all these products, if the brand says something is soft or neutral, it's mostly leans more like a warm, and if the shade name is more like a dusty rose shade, it leans more like a neutral or slightly mauvey color. And if I swatch it on the back of my hand, obviously it definitely looks warm. It looks like a strawberry pink with warm undertones, and it's pretty vibrant at the same time. Compared to this HAUS lip blush that I found is very muted and mauvey shade, those two shades look very different. The Makeup by Mario one is more saturated, more warm. And if I compare this with the Milk Makeup, the Makeup by Mario is brighter and more red. After one swipe, the warm pink appears on my cheek. Once blended, a slightly stronger orange flush remains, and after another layer, it develops into a more orangish red tone. So I found this shade is just warm tone blush instead of neutral tones because of that strong orangish warm color in the shade. Next up, we have the last cream blush. This is Tower 28 BeachPlease cream blush in the shade Magic Hour. The brand described this shade as Sunkissed Nude Rose, so I could guess that this can be pretty like warm tone based, because if I think about Sunkissed color, it's something more like bronzy, warm tone based color. But the thing about this shade is it looks very different online. If you look at the color, the online photos looks much like lighter, more like a nudie shade, while this shade in real life is more like a muted, darker color, which is why we are always confused about the shade on the website and in real life. Once I swatch it on the back of my hands, it appears as a warm nude beige with a very little pink or red. Once it's blended, it looks more like a true nude shade. If you compare this shade with a Milk Makeup blush, I found that this Milk Makeup one is pinker and more saturated, while this Magic Hour shade is more like a nude beige color. After one layer, a warm nude appears on my cheeks, more of a nude beige than pink, and once blended, it leans toward a orange flush with little to no pink or red. After a second layer, the orange tones become stronger. Overall, this is just warm tone blush, not the neutral one unfortunately, but I still find this could be very beautiful during summer season, more like a beachy, bronzy, like a sun-kissed look. And moving on to powder blushes, I asked you guys on my Instagram whether I need to include powder blushes in the list or not, and many of you guys said I should include them, so here I am. I have 5 powder blushes today, and nowadays the brands release more like a cream product, so there aren't that many powder blush options, especially like neutral pink colors, so that's why I have very small ranges, but they're still very pretty colors. So I'm gonna first review this YSL Make Me Blush, and I chose this shade 44. The brand described this as a iconic dusty pink color, and I would say this is like a true neutral pink blush. At first glance, I found this shade could be a perfect neutral pink color with a hint of cool, a little bit like a purple undertone. Once blended, the subtle gold shimmers appear, so even though the blush reads a bit cool on its own, the gold shimmer balances it out and makes the shade feels more neutral. Compared to a shade with similar depths like Armani Beauty and Saie, the YSL one falls right in the middle. The Armani shade looks cooler, while the Saie one appears warmer than the YSL blush. Once applied to my skin, it leans slightly cool pink, but thanks to the golden shimmer, it reflects beautifully and reads as a neutral, beautiful shade. So because of that gold shimmers, I found that this still could work well for neutral and olive undertones. So if you have neutral, cool, olive skin, this can be a great neutral pink powder blush. Next up, another luxury brand powder blush. This is Armani Beauty Luminous Silk Blurring Natural Glow Powder Blush, and I chose the shade 51. The brand described this shade as dusty rose shade, and as you can see, it leans more like a cool pink, slightly like a mauve shade. And once it's blended into my skin, it definitely reads as a cool pink. There's a subtle sheen from very fine shimmers. I found that the shimmers are more like a silver base than the gold like the YSL one, so that's what it makes the shade even like cooler. Compared to other powder blush shades, you can see it's the coolest shade, and on my cheeks it definitely looks like a cool pink color with a slightly berry undertone. So overall, I found this shade is more like a cool, maybe a little bit of neutral color in it, but more on the cool side. So this is more like a berry purple base color that will work well for more like a cool undertone skin. Next up, we have the Saie SuperSuede Radiant Powder Blush in the shade MIA, and the brand described as a soft rose shade. This is like a baked powder blush, and it has a very fine pigment once I blend it with my fingers, and it comes out really beautifully and a little bit of sheen glow. And if you look at the color on its own, it looks slightly like warm, and as you can see from the comparison, it's the warmest one. And when I apply it to my cheeks, since it has very sheer coverage, it's not too obvious, but it still gives a soft dusty rose shade that's balanced, not too warm, not too cool. So among all these 3 luxury brands or like Sephora brands powder blushes, I found this can be the perfect neutral blush shade that's not too warm or not too cool or not too purplish. I really love this shade as well as a perfect neutral blush color. Next, we have this Korean brand. This is the brand called Naming, and this brand is really popular for their like matte lips and this type of powder blush, and their shade shade ranges are mostly like muted color, which I order more shades of this because I love the powder pigments. It's like very natural looking coverage. And I chose the shade Page. This is very light muted color. This is the lightest shade among all these blushes today. And if you look at the swatches, it's neither cool nor warm, right in between. And if you compare to the TONYMOLY blush next to it, the blush looks cooler and more neutral. Since it's such a light color, it appears very subtle on my skin. I think it's perfect for people with fair skin, or you can use it as a blush shade before you use this type of more like a stronger color so that you can create more like a gradient look. Although the shade itself is very light, might look too pale on my skin, but I still find it works well as a like very light, soft, blurry look blush color. So I found this can be very beautiful if you have light, fair skin. I highly recommend this color. Last but not least, we have this TONYMOLY Cheek Tone Jelly Blusher. It looks like a powder blush, but it's actually a jelly texture, so you can actually apply with your fingers, and it's like a cushiony texture. This product went viral because I saw that Hailey Bieber used this for her like makeup routine, so I had to try after watching that video. As soon as I applied that product, I found that this could be slightly warm muted pink, and if I compare to the naming powder blush, the TONYMOLY one looks warmer and slightly darker. And the thing about this packaging is you can take this out and there's a like cushiony pop so that you can apply it with this pop, and then you can just tap or just blend it so that you can create that soft blurry blush look. Once I apply it to my cheeks, it gives a soft warm neutral pink blush, very sheer, very subtle, and it's very natural. Overall, I found this shade is very beautiful neutral pink color with a bit of warm in it, and if you have light medium skin or light fair skin, I think this shade will come out very beautifully. And since it has a really sheer coverage, if you're a beginner in makeup, I found this type of like sheer coverage looking product will easy to use because you don't get that crazy pigment from the blush itself, so you can just keep like blending until you get the look you want. These are all my thoughts on 25 neutral pink blushes. I hope you guys find it very helpful. Although all these shades looks very similar, these are all different. Whether it's undertone, saturation, like darkness, I think the best way to like detect the product's undertone is actually to compare. So that's what I compare each color with different products, with other blush shades, so that you can see how it looks different and see the color more accurately, so that you can actually practice when you go to Sephora or any makeup counter to find your perfect match. To sum up all these product review, I can give you like recommendation for each skin tone. If you have warm neutral, these are the perfect shades, and if you have just neutral undertones, this will work really well. If you have cool neutral undertones, highly recommend this. And if you have olive undertones, try these shades. And if you have neutral olive undertones like me, these are the best. And please let me know if there's any other product category or specific color that you want me to review, whether it's a blush, lipstick, lip gloss. I'd love to know about that. And I'm thinking about reviewing all the mauve shades, but I'm not sure, so please let me know if you want me to review mauve blushes, because I found that mauve color looks really good on neutral olive skin. So let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye!